The ship came out of faster-than-light travel with a soft hum. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the viewing window and looked at the planet below. It was called Nexus Prime, the center of all galactic politics. Here, the 12 most powerful species in the known universe met to decide the fate of billions. Elena was 53 years old. She had spent her entire adult life preparing for this moment. Earth had chosen her from thousands of candidates because she was calm, smart, and patient. She believed in peace. She believed that all species could learn to work together. "Ambassador, we are ready to descend," said Captain Morrison from behind her. Elena nodded but did not turn around. She was looking at the massive space stations that circled the planet. Each one belonged to a different species. Each one was bigger than anything humanity had ever built. The smallest of them could hold the population of a medium-sized Earth city. Humanity had discovered faster-than-light travel only 200 years ago. In galactic terms, they were babies. The species that ruled this part of the universe had been traveling between stars for millions of years. They had built empires that covered thousands of worlds. They had technologies that humans could not even understand. And now, humanity wanted to join them. The shuttle descended through the clouds. Elena saw the council building for the first time and her breath caught in her throat. It was a tower made of something that looked like crystal, but was harder than any material on Earth. It rose 3 kilometers into the sky and glowed with soft blue light. Around it, smaller buildings spread out like a garden of impossible architecture. "Beautiful," Elena whispered. "It is meant to intimidate," said her aide, a young man named David Chen. "Everything here is designed to make younger species feel small and weak. Then we will not let it work on us," Elena said with a small smile. The shuttle landed on a platform near the top of the tower. When the doors opened, Elena stepped out into thin, cold air. A group of aliens waited for her. She recognized them from the briefing files she had studied for years. The Kathrani were insect-like creatures that stood on 4 legs. They had hard shells that reflected light and large compound eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Their leader, High Arbiter Zethvaran, wore metal decorations on his shell that showed his rank. "You are the human," Zethvaran said. His voice came through a translation device that hung around what Elena guessed was his neck. "You are smaller than I expected. Size is not everything," Elena replied politely. The Kathrani made a clicking sound that might have been laughter. "In this galaxy, it is everything. Come, the council is waiting." They walked through corridors that seemed to go on forever. Elena saw other species along the way. The Marathi were beings made of something like thick liquid, held together by force fields. The Orvelians were giants made of living rock, each one 3 meters tall. There were others too, species that Elena had no names for, each one stranger than the last. All of them looked at her with the same expression. It was not hatred, it was not fear. It was the look that a person might give to an insect crawling across the floor. It was complete and total dismissal. The council chamber was a massive circular room. 12 thrones sat in a ring around a central platform. Each throne was designed for a different kind of body. The Kathrani throne looked like a nest. The Marathi throne was a container filled with the same thick liquid that made up their bodies. The Orvelian throne was simply a massive slab of stone. Elena was led to the center platform. She stood there alone, surrounded by the most powerful beings in the galaxy. She felt very small. "The human delegation requests formal recognition," announced a voice that came from everywhere at once. "They request trade rights, diplomatic protection, and membership in the Covenant of Civilized Species." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the Marathi delegate made a bubbling sound. "What do they offer in return?" it asked. "Friendship," Elena said, stepping forward. Her voice was steady even though her heart was racing. "Partnership. We are new to the stars, but we are eager to learn. We can offer new perspectives, new ideas, new ways of thinking. We ask only for the chance to prove ourselves." More silence. Then Zethvaran leaned forward on his throne. "New perspectives," he repeated. "New ideas. These things are worthless to us human. We have had millions of years to develop our perspectives. What could your species possibly teach us?" "Perhaps nothing," Elena admitted. "But we could still be useful allies. We are hard workers. We adapt quickly." "You are weak," interrupted the Orvelian delegate. Its voice was like grinding stones. Your bodies are soft. You have no natural weapons. You cannot survive in any environment without artificial help. You are perhaps the most fragile species ever to achieve space travel. Elena felt anger rising in her chest, but she pushed it down. We have survived on our world for 300,000 years. We have overcome ice ages, plagues, and wars. We are stronger than we look. The council members looked at each other. Something passed between them, a communication that Elena could not hear or understand. Then Zethvaran spoke again. "We have considered your request," he said, "and we have decided to be generous. Humanity may join the covenant of civilized species under the following terms." He listed them slowly, making sure Elena understood each one. 40% of humanity's population would be taken as a labor force to work on whatever projects the council assigned them. All human colonies outside the Sol system would be surrendered immediately. Humans would submit to genetic modification to make them more useful as workers, and humanity would pay a tribute of resources equal to 10% of Earth's total production, every year, forever. Elena listened in growing horror. These were not terms for partnership. These were terms for slavery. "These terms are not acceptable," she said when Zethvaran finished. "We came here seeking equality, not servitude. Surely there is room for negotiation." "There is no negotiation," Zethvaran replied. "These terms are final. Accept them or leave." Elena straightened her spine. She thought about Earth, about the billions of people who had put their hope in her. She thought about her daughter, only 12 years old, who dreamed of one day traveling to other planets. "Then I must respectfully decline," she said. "Humanity will find its own way among the stars. We do not need the Council's permission to exist." The chamber went very quiet. Elena saw something change in Zethvaran's compound eyes. Later, she would learn that this was how the Kathrani showed killing intent. "You refuse us," he said softly. "You stand in our chamber, a representative of a species that has existed for the blink of an eye, and you refuse us." "I refuse slavery," Elena said. "Any human would do the same." Zethvaran made a gesture with one of his limbs. Guards appeared from hidden doors around the chamber. They were Kathrani soldiers, armed with weapons that glowed with deadly light. "Then you will serve as an example," Zethvaran said. "Let all young species see what happens when they forget their place." The guards grabbed Elena before she could move. She struggled, but they were far too strong. They dragged her to the center of the chamber and forced her to her knees. "This is being broadcast," Zethvaran announced. "Every world, every station, every ship with a receiver is watching. Remember this moment." Elena looked up at the aliens who sat in judgment above her. She was afraid, but she did not beg. She would not give them that satisfaction. "Earth will remember too," she said quietly. The execution was quick. The Kathrani believed in efficiency, not cruelty. But they made sure the galaxy saw it happen. They made sure everyone understood the message. Do not challenge the Council. Do not ask for equality. Know your place, or die. On Earth, 3 billion people watched the feed in real time. They saw their ambassador kneel. They saw her die. They saw the Kathrani's compound eyes gleaming with satisfaction. And something changed in humanity that day. Something cold and hard took root in their collective heart. They did not cry. They did not scream. They simply watched, and waited, and began to plan. The galaxy would learn soon enough that killing Elena Vasquez was the worst mistake the Council had ever made. The days after the execution were strange ones for the galaxy. Everyone expected something to happen. Everyone waited for humanity to respond. But the response never came. High Arbiter Zethvaran sat in his private chambers on Vethkar, the Kathrani homeworld. He was reading reports from his intelligence officers, and what he read confused him. Earth had gone quiet. All human ships had returned to their home system. All human colonies had been evacuated. The handful of human merchants and travelers scattered across the galaxy had simply disappeared, returning home without a word. It was as if the entire species had pulled back behind an invisible wall. "They are grieving," said Zethvaran's aide, a younger Kathrani named Crix. "Young species always grieve when they lose a leader. They will emerge eventually, weaker and more willing to accept terms." "Perhaps," Zethvaran said, but he was not so sure. He had studied humans before the execution. He had read their history, translated by council scholars who found the whole species amusing. The humans had a saying, "Those who forget history are doomed to repeat it." Seth Varan had not forgotten what he learned. Humans were violent creatures. They had spent most of their existence killing each other. They had developed weapons of mass destruction long before they developed faster-than-light travel. They had fought wars so terrible that they had nearly wiped themselves out multiple times, and yet they survived. Every time, they survived. "Send observers to the Sol system," Seth Varan ordered. "I want to know what they are doing." The observers left the next day. They never returned. 2 weeks after the execution, the Marathi delegate contacted Seth Varan. Its name was Flowing Current, and it was one of the oldest members of the council. "The humans have refused our trade envoys," Flowing Current said, its voice bubbling through the communication screen. "They have closed their borders completely. No one goes in, no one comes out. They are sulking," Seth Varan replied, "like children who did not get what they wanted." "Perhaps, but I have lived for 12,000 years, High Arbiter. I have seen many young species rise and fall. I have never seen one react this way." "What do you mean?" "When we break a young species, they always do one of two things. They submit, or they fight. They beg for mercy, or they throw themselves against us in hopeless battle. The humans are doing neither. They are simply waiting." Seth Varan felt something cold move through his body. It was not quite fear. The Kathrani did not feel fear as other species did, but it was close. "What do you suggest?" he asked. "I suggest we watch them very carefully," Flowing Current replied, "and I suggest we prepare for the possibility that we have made a mistake." The weeks turned into months. The galaxy slowly forgot about the human ambassador. There were other matters to attend to, other young species to manage, other threats to deal with. The council had ruled for millions of years. One dead human was barely worth remembering. On Earth, things were very different. David Chen had been Elena's aide. He had been in the shuttle when she died, watching the feed from orbit because the council had not allowed him to accompany her into the chamber. He had seen everything. Now he stood in a room deep beneath the mountains of Switzerland, surrounded by people he had never met before. Military officers, scientists, politicians, all of them wore the same expression of cold determination. A woman stood at the front of the room. Her name was Admiral Chen Wei Lin, and she was no relation to David despite sharing his family name. She was 60 years old, with gray hair and eyes that seemed to cut through steel. "You have all been summoned here because you have the highest security clearance," she said. "What I am about to tell you does not leave this room. If you speak of it to anyone, you will be charged with treason and executed. Is that understood?" Everyone nodded. "Good." The Admiral pressed a button, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the room. It showed something that looked like a massive cannon, floating in space near the orbit of Saturn. "This is the Omega Array," she said. "It has been under construction for 150 years. Its existence is known to fewer than 500 people on Earth. It is the most destructive weapon humanity has ever created." David stared at the image. The weapon was enormous, larger than most space stations. It was shaped like a long cylinder, pointed at the stars. "The Omega Array fires a concentrated beam of gamma radiation," the Admiral continued. "At full power, it can sterilize a planet from over 10 light-years away. It was designed for one purpose: to destroy any species that threatened human survival." "You knew this would happen," David said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. "You knew the Council would reject us. You knew they would kill the ambassador." Admiral Chen met his eyes without flinching. "We hoped for the best," she said, "but we prepared for the worst. We have always prepared for the worst. That is how humanity has survived for 300,000 years." She pressed another button. The display changed, showing more weapons. Ships that moved at nearly the speed of light. Bombs that could crack planets in half. Viruses designed to kill specific alien biologies. An army of machines that could strip a world bare in days. "For 200 years we have been building in secret," the Admiral said. "Every government on Earth has contributed. Every scientist who could be trusted has worked on these projects. We called it the Last Light Protocol. If humanity was ever threatened with extinction, we would make sure our enemies died with us." "This is insane," someone muttered. "No," the Admiral replied. "This is survival. The Council has shown us what the galaxy thinks of peace. They have shown us what happens when we ask nicely. Now we will show them what happens when we stop asking. On the 40th day after the execution, a single transmission left Earth. It was broadcast on every frequency, using every method of communication that humanity had ever discovered. It reached every corner of the galaxy within hours. The message was simple, just 4 words. Remember what you did. High Arbiter Zethvorin received the message in his chambers. He read it 3 times, trying to understand what it meant. It sounded like a threat, but it was so vague. What were the humans planning? He called an emergency meeting of the Council. For the first time in centuries, all 12 species gathered to discuss a single young species. We should strike now, the Orvelian delegate said. Destroy their homeworld before they can act. That would be wasteful. Flowing Current disagreed. We do not even know if they are capable of threatening us. They are primitives. What could they possibly do? Then we wait and watch. Another delegate suggested. Let them make the first move. The debate went on for hours. In the end, the Council decided to do nothing. The humans were too weak to be a real threat. Their message was probably just empty words, the last defiance of a broken species. In time, they would come crawling back, ready to accept whatever terms the Council offered. That was the decision. The greatest mistake in galactic history. Back on Earth, Admiral Chen stood before a massive screen showing the Council's response, or rather, their lack of response. They had dismissed humanity. Again, they think we are bluffing, she said to her officers. They think we are too weak to hurt them. Are we? One officer asked. The Admiral smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. 200 years of preparation, she said. $50 trillion in secret funding. The combined genius of our entire species, working in the shadows. And they think we are bluffing. She turned to face her command staff. Begin Operation Erasure, she ordered. Start with the Kathrani. Their High Arbiter gave the order to kill our ambassador. Their species will be the first to learn what that decision cost them. The officers saluted and went to their stations. Outside, the stars shone cold and bright. Somewhere out there, the Kathrani were going about their lives, confident in their power, certain of their safety. They had no idea that death was coming for them, and when it arrived, it would come not with a roar, but with a silence, the same silence that had followed Elena's death. The silence of a species that had stopped talking and started planning, the silence of humanity's rage. Deep beneath the ice of Antarctica, in a facility that appeared on no map, humanity's true nature was revealed. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Okonkwo walked through corridors carved from frozen rock. She had been summoned here 3 days ago, told only that she was needed for a mission of extreme importance. She had served in Earth's Space Navy for 15 years. She had seen combat against pirates and smugglers. She thought she understood war. She was wrong. The facility was called Site Zero. It had been built over 80 years ago, hidden from satellites by a combination of ice, rock, and technology that bent light around its entrances. Less than 1,000 people knew it existed. Until today, Sarah had not been one of them. Her guide was a scientist named Dr. Marcus Webb. He was old, nearly 90, but his mind was sharp and his eyes were bright with something that might have been excitement or madness. You are wondering why you are here, Dr. Webb said as they walked. The thought crossed my mind. Sarah replied. You are here because you scored highest in psychological stability among all candidates. You are here because you have no close family, no romantic attachments, nothing that would make you hesitate when the time comes. And you are here because humanity needs people who can do terrible things for the right reasons. They stopped at a massive door. Dr. Webb pressed his hand against a scanner, and the door slid open to reveal a chamber so large that Sarah could not see the far wall. Inside were ships, hundreds of them, thousands of them. They hung from the ceiling like sleeping bats, each one shaped like a long needle with engines at one end and nothing at the other. These are Prometheus vessels, Dr. Webb said. Each one carries a payload of pure antimatter, contained in magnetic bottles. When they reach their target, they release the payload. The matter-antimatter reaction releases energy equivalent to several thousand nuclear weapons. Sarah stared at the ships. How many are there? In this facility? 12,000. In facilities around the world? Over 100,000. That is enough to destroy every major city on every council world. Yes, Dr. Webb said simply. That is the point. They continued walking. The next chamber held something different, rows upon rows of cylinders, each one glowing with soft blue light. Inside each cylinder floated something that looked almost human, but not quite. The proportions were wrong. The skin was too smooth. The eyes were too large. These are echoes, Dr. Webb explained. Artificial bodies controlled by uploaded human minds. When a volunteer agrees to become an echo, their consciousness is copied into one of these forms. The original person continues to live their life normally. The echo becomes a weapon. Why? Sarah asked. Why not just use regular soldiers? Because regular soldiers have survival instincts. They hesitate. They make mistakes. An echo does not care about survival. An echo will fly a ship directly into a target, without a moment of doubt. An echo will fight until its body is completely destroyed. And even then, it will try to crawl toward the enemy. Sarah felt cold. How many volunteers do you have? Currently, about 50,000. By the time Operation Erasure begins, we expect to have over 200,000. The tour continued. Sarah saw weapons that defied imagination. There were bombs that could destabilize a star, causing it to go supernova. There were plagues designed to kill specific species, engineered to spread through populations like wildfire. There were swarms of tiny machines that could eat through any material, breaking it down into its base elements. And at the heart of it all was the Omega Array. Dr. Webb took Sarah to a viewing platform that looked out into space. Through the window, she could see Saturn's rings glittering in the distance. And between Earth and Saturn, she could see something that looked like a giant gun pointed at the stars. The Omega Array is the most powerful weapon ever created, Dr. Webb said. His voice was soft, almost reverent. It fires a beam of focused gamma radiation that travels at the speed of light. At full power, it can sterilize a planet from 10 light-years away. Everything on the surface dies. Plants, animals, people, bacteria. Nothing survives. How long does the effect last? Sarah asked. The radiation makes the planet uninhabitable for approximately 50,000 years, long enough for any civilization living there to be completely forgotten. Sarah turned to face the old scientist. Why are you showing me this? Because you have been selected to command the first strike. Dr. Webb replied. Admiral Chen believes you have the strength to do what must be done. The Council killed our ambassador. They broadcasted her death to the entire galaxy as a warning to other young species. Now we will send our own message. And what message is that? Dr. Webb smiled. It was a sad smile. The smile of a man who had spent his entire life preparing for a war he hoped would never come. The message is simple, he said. If you attack humanity, there is no victory. There is no conquest. There is no survival. There is only mutual destruction. We cannot defeat the Council in a fair fight. We do not have the ships, the technology, or the numbers. But we can make sure that any species that destroys us will not live to celebrate. That night, Sarah attended a briefing with Admiral Chen and the other commanders selected for Operation Erasure. The room was filled with men and women who looked like ordinary people. Teachers, engineers, scientists, soldiers. All of them had been chosen for their ability to do terrible things without breaking. Let me be clear about what we are going to do, Admiral Chen said. We are not going to fight a war. Wars can be won or lost. What we are going to do is commit genocide on a scale the galaxy has never seen. She paused to let that sink in. The Kathrani will be first. They gave the order to kill Ambassador Vasquez. They will pay the highest price. After them, we will target the other Council species one by one. We will destroy their homeworlds, their colonies, their fleets. We will not stop until they surrender unconditionally or until they are all dead. What about civilians? Someone asked. There are no civilians in this war. The Admiral replied. The Council declared war on all of humanity when they killed our ambassador. Every member of every Council species is responsible for what happened. Every member will pay the price. Sarah felt sick. She had killed before, in battles that seemed small and clean compared to this. But she also remembered the broadcast. She remembered watching Elena Vasquez kneel in that chamber, surrounded by aliens who saw her as less than nothing. She remembered the way the Kathrani had laughed. I have a question, Sarah said. What if the Council surrenders? What if they agree to our terms? Admiral Chen looked at her for a long moment. Then we stop. she said finally. "We are not monsters, Commander Okonkwo. We do not want to kill trillions of innocent beings, but we need the Council to understand that we will if we have to. That is the only language they understand. That is the only thing that will keep humanity safe." The briefing continued for several more hours. Sarah learned the details of her mission. She would command a fleet of 500 Prometheus vessels. Her target was the Kathrani homeworld of Vethkar. She would approach at near light speed, giving the enemy only hours to prepare. And then she would release weapons that would burn their civilization to ash. When the briefing ended, Sarah walked alone to the viewing platform. She looked out at the stars and thought about what she was going to do. Somewhere out there, the Kathrani were living their lives. They were raising children. They were building homes. They were dreaming dreams that they believed would come true. They had no idea that those dreams would soon turn to nightmares. Sarah closed her eyes and made a choice. She would do this terrible thing. She would burn worlds and kill billions. And she would do it because humanity deserved to survive. Even if survival meant becoming the very monsters they fought against. That was the doctrine. That was the price. And in the end, it was a price she was willing to pay. The Kathrani homeworld of Vethkar had 14 billion inhabitants. It was a beautiful planet, covered with forests that glowed at night and oceans that sang with the voices of creatures found nowhere else in the galaxy. The Kathrani had lived there for 60 million years, building a civilization that spanned stars. All of it ended in 12 hours. The first warning came from a listening post on the edge of the system. A young Kathrani officer named Trix was monitoring the sensors when she noticed something strange. Objects were approaching at incredible speed, moving so fast that they were almost impossible to track. "What is that?" her commander asked, looking at the display. "I do not know," Trix replied. "They are coming from the direction of Earth, but no ship can move that fast. The readings must be wrong." They were not wrong. The Prometheus vessels had accelerated for months, reaching 99% of the speed of light. At that velocity, time itself slowed down for the ships and their echo pilots. The journey that would have taken years at normal speeds took only weeks. Now they were here, and they were not slowing down. High Arbiter Zethvoran received the alert in the middle of a meeting. He looked at the data and felt something he had never felt before. True fear. "How many?" he demanded. 500 objects, his aide Crix replied. "They will reach the homeworld in approximately 11 hours. Scramble the fleet, activate all defensive systems, contact the Council, and request immediate assistance." But even as he gave the orders, Zethvoran knew it was hopeless. The objects were moving too fast for interception. They were too small to target with most weapons, and there were too many of them to stop even if the Kathrani threw everything they had at the incoming threat. On the lead Prometheus vessel, Sarah Okonkwo felt nothing. Her consciousness had been transferred to an echo body before the mission began. She could still think, still plan, still make decisions, but the emotions that would have overwhelmed her human body were muted, distant, like voices heard through a thick wall. "Target acquisition confirmed," she reported to the fleet. "All vessels, prepare for payload release on my command." The Kathrani tried everything. They launched missiles, fired beam weapons, deployed their fastest ships in a desperate attempt to intercept. Some of the Prometheus vessels were destroyed, but most of them got through. When the payloads released, they fell toward Vethkar like silver rain. The antimatter weapons detonated in sequence, starting with the major population centers. The capital city, home to 3 billion Kathrani, vanished in a flash of light so bright that it was visible from space. The second largest city followed a moment later, then the third, then the fourth. Firestorms swept across continents. The atmosphere itself caught fire, burning away the oxygen that the Kathrani needed to breathe. Oceans boiled. Mountains crumbled. The forests that had glowed with life for millions of years turned to ash in seconds. And still the bombs fell. When it was over, Vethkar was a dead world. The surface was covered in molten rock and radioactive dust. Nothing larger than bacteria survived. 14 billion Kathrani had died in less than a day. Sarah watched from orbit, recording everything. The images would be broadcast across the galaxy, just as the Council had broadcast Elena's execution. The message was clear. "You killed one of us. We killed all of you." The Galactic Council met in emergency session. For the first time in anyone's memory, the chamber was filled with fear instead of arrogance. The throne of the Kathrani sat empty, a reminder of what humanity had done. "This is impossible," the Orvelian delegate said. Its voice was no longer steady. "The humans are primitives. They cannot have this kind of power. And yet, Vethkar is gone." Flowing Current replied. The Marathi's voice was quiet, thoughtful. "I warned you. I told you we should not underestimate them. We must negotiate," another delegate urged. "Offer them whatever they want. Give them the ambassador's killers. Give them territory, resources, anything." But humanity was not interested in negotiation. Not anymore. The second wave came 3 months later. This time, the target was the Kathrani military. Fleet bases, shipyards, weapons factories, everything that could be used to fight back was destroyed. The Kathrani fought with desperate courage, but they were fighting an enemy they could not understand. Human ships did not behave like normal ships. They did not try to survive. They flew directly into defensive formations, crashing through shields and armor before detonating their payloads. The Echo pilots did not fear death because they were already copies. Their original selves were safe on Earth, watching through remote feeds as their duplicates sacrificed themselves again and again. "They are insane," a Kathrani commander reported before his station was destroyed. "They do not fight to win. They fight to take us with them." On Earth, Admiral Chen received regular updates from the front lines. The casualty figures were staggering, beyond anything in human history. The Kathrani were being erased from existence, and they had done nothing to stop it. "The Council is requesting a meeting," her aide reported one morning. "Tell them no," Chen replied. "We will speak with them when we are ready. Until then, the operation continues." The operation was not just about the Kathrani anymore. Human ships were striking targets across the galaxy, hitting the infrastructure of every Council species. Trade routes were disrupted. Communication networks were destroyed. The carefully balanced economy of the galactic civilization began to collapse. And then came the plagues. Earth's scientists had spent decades studying alien biology. They had created viruses that targeted specific species, spreading through populations faster than any quarantine could contain. The Murathi were hit first, their liquid bodies providing perfect environments for the engineered pathogens. Billions died within weeks. The Orvelians thought they were safe. Their silicon bodies were immune to biological weapons, but humanity had prepared for that too. Nanomachines, smaller than dust particles, were released into their atmosphere. The machines burrowed into the Orvelians' bodies, eating them from the inside out. One by one, the Council species fell. On Nexus Prime, the surviving delegates gathered in their shrinking chamber. 6 of the 12 thrones were now empty. The species that had once sat there were either extinct or reduced to scattered refugees fleeing through the void. "We must surrender," Flowing Current said. The Marathi's voice was weak, its body smaller than it had been before the plague began. "There is no other choice." "Surrender to what?" the Orvelian delegate demanded. "The humans do not want our submission. They want our deaths. Then we must make them want something else. We must offer them something valuable enough to stop the killing. What could we possibly offer them?" Flowing Current's body rippled with what might have been a sigh. "Everything," it said. "We offer them everything. Our technology, our territory, our complete and unconditional surrender. We admit that we were wrong. We beg for mercy." The debate lasted for hours, but in the end, there was no real choice. The Council had lost half its members and most of its military power. If humanity continued their campaign, there would be nothing left to surrender. A message was sent to Earth. The most powerful beings in the galaxy, who had once looked at humans as worthless insects, were now begging for their lives. Admiral Chen received the message and read it carefully. Then she called a meeting of her senior staff. "They want to surrender," she said. "What do you think?" "It could be a trap," one officer suggested. "They might be buying time to prepare a counterattack." "With what?" Another officer replied. "We have destroyed 70% of their military capacity. They have nothing left to fight with." Chen nodded slowly. "What about the Kathrani?" "There are still survivors, colonies that we haven't reached yet. They are scattered and leaderless. No longer a threat." The Admiral was silent for a long moment. She thought about Elena Vasquez, who had died believing in peace. She thought about the trillions of aliens who had died because of what happened in that council chamber. She thought about the world she had helped create, a galaxy soaked in blood and fire. "We accept their surrender," she said finally. "But we do it on our terms. They will give us everything: technology, territory, recognition. And they will never ever forget what they did to Ambassador Vasquez." She looked around the room at the men and women who had helped her wage this terrible war. "This is not victory," she said. "This is survival. We did what we had to do. Now we have to live with it." Outside, the stars continued to shine. But for the species of the Galactic Council, those stars would never look the same again. The humans had come to them asking for friendship. The Council had answered with murder, and now the Council was learning what that murder had cost them. Everything. The surrender ceremony took place exactly 1 year after Elena Vasquez's death. It was held in the same chamber where she had been executed, a choice that was deliberate and cruel. Admiral Chen stood at the center of the platform where Elena had knelt. Around her, the 7 surviving Council species sat in their thrones, but they no longer looked powerful. They looked broken. The Kathrani delegate was new, a female named Vera who had survived because she was on a distant colony when Vethkar burned. She was the highest-ranking member of her species, still alive. There were only 3 million Kathrani left in the entire galaxy, scattered across a handful of worlds. The Marathi delegate, Flowing Current, had shrunk to half its original size. The plague had killed most of its species before a cure could be found. It moved slowly now, its thoughts clouded by age and grief. The others were in similar states. The proud species that had once ruled the galaxy were now shadows of themselves, waiting to hear what humanity would demand. Chen let the silence stretch. She wanted them to feel the weight of this moment. 1 year ago, she began, your council murdered our ambassador. She came to you in peace, asking only for a chance to prove humanity's worth. You answered her with execution. You broadcast her death to the galaxy as a warning. She paused, looking at each delegate in turn. Today, you will receive our terms. These terms are not negotiable. You will accept them, or the killing will continue until there is no one left to accept anything. The terms were extensive. All surviving council species would dismantle their military forces. They would be allowed to keep police and defensive units, but nothing capable of threatening another world. All warships would be destroyed or turned over to humanity. All technology would be shared with Earth without restriction. Every scientific discovery, every engineering secret, every piece of knowledge accumulated over millions of years would belong to humanity. Humanity would have permanent veto power over any future galactic governing body. No law, no treaty, no decision of any kind could be made without human approval. And finally, every world in the galaxy would teach the truth about what happened. Elena Vasquez's story would be required learning for every child, of every species, forever. They would learn that humanity came in peace. They would learn that the Council answered with murder. They would learn what that murder cost. We do not ask for slaves, Chen said. We do not ask for tribute. We ask only that you remember. Remember what you did, and remember what we are capable of doing in return. Flowing Current spoke first. Its voice was barely above a whisper. We accept your terms, it said. And we apologize for what it is worth. We apologize for the death of your ambassador and for the suffering we have caused. Apologies mean nothing, Chen replied. Only actions matter, and your actions will be watched for the rest of time. The ceremony ended with a signing of documents that would reshape galactic civilization. As the delegates left the chamber, they passed by workers who were already preparing the space for its new purpose. The council chamber would become a memorial. At its center would stand a statue of Elena Vasquez, 30 meters tall, carved from a material that would not decay for 1,000,000 years. She would be shown standing tall, her eyes raised to the stars, her hand extended in a gesture of peace. At the base of the statue, an inscription would be carved in every known language. She came in peace. You answered with blood. Remember, David Chen was there for the dedication of the memorial. He had aged in the year since Elena's death, his hair now streaked with gray, his face lined with grief that would never fully heal. But he forced himself to come, to see the final chapter of the story. Admiral Chen Wei-Lin stood beside him. She had retired from military service the day the surrender was signed. She said she had done her duty, and now she wanted peace. But David could see the weight she carried. The guilt, that would never leave her. Was it worth it? He asked quietly. The Admiral was silent for a long time. I do not know, she finally said. We killed trillions to avenge one death. We burned entire civilizations to ash. We became exactly what they feared we might be. They gave us no choice. Perhaps. But that does not make it easier to live with. They watched as the statue was unveiled. Elena Vasquez's stone face stared into eternity, forever frozen in a moment of hope. She would have hated this, David said. She believed in peace. She believed we could be better than them, and we proved we could be worse, the Admiral replied. That is the tragedy. We proved that when pushed hard enough, humans can be the most terrible species in the galaxy, or the most determined to survive. The Admiral nodded slowly. Both things can be true. In the years that followed, humanity spread across the stars. They took the technology of the fallen Council species and improved it. They colonized worlds that had once been forbidden to them. They built an empire that covered more territory than all the Council species combined. But they did not become tyrants. For all their power, humans remembered what they had been. They remembered being the newcomers, the primitives, the species that no one took seriously. They remembered Elena Vasquez, who had died believing in a better future, and so they helped the younger species. When new civilizations achieved faster than light travel, humanity welcomed them as equals. When they asked for trade and protection, humanity gave it freely. The empire that rose from the ashes of the old council was not based on fear or domination. It was based on a simple promise. We will protect you. We will help you. And we will never, ever treat you the way we were treated. Some called humanity hypocrites. They had committed genocide and then claimed to be champions of peace. How could they be trusted? But the younger species saw something else. They saw a people who had learned from their mistakes. They saw a civilization that had looked into the abyss and chosen not to fall. Most importantly, they saw a warning. Do not underestimate the quiet ones. Do not mistake kindness for weakness. And never, ever assume that a species will simply accept destruction. Humanity had proven what they were capable of when pushed beyond all limits. They had proven that they would do anything to survive. And that knowledge, that fear, kept the galaxy at peace for 10,000 years. On the memorial world that had once been Nexus Prime, the statue of Elena Vasquez still stood. Billions visited it every year. Beings from hundreds of different species. They came to see the face of the woman who had started it all. At the base of the statue, someone had carved an additional inscription. No one knew who had done it or when. The words were simple, written in human English. We didn't start this, but we finished it. Admiral Chen Weilin died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 103. She was buried on Earth, in a small cemetery near Lake Geneva. Her gravestone bore no mention of her rank, her victories, or the role she played in reshaping galactic history. It said only, she did what had to be done. David Chen lived even longer, spending his final years writing the official history of the Contact War. He wanted future generations to understand not just what happened, but why. He wanted them to know that humanity was not proud of what they did. They were simply determined to survive. The last words of his book became famous across the galaxy. We came to the stars with open hands and hopeful hearts. We asked only for a chance to prove ourselves. When that chance was denied, when our ambassador was murdered for the crime of believing in peace, we responded with the only language the galaxy understood: violence. It was not noble. It was not heroic. It was simply human. We are not monsters. But we can become monsters if we are forced to. We can become worse than monsters. We can become extinction itself. Remember that. Whoever reads these words, remember what we were willing to do, and then ask yourself, was it really wise to test us? The book was translated into 10,000 languages. It was read by trillions of beings across the galaxy, and every one of them came away with the same understanding. Humanity was dangerous. Humanity was capable of terrible things, but humanity was also capable of mercy, of kindness, of building something better from the ruins of destruction. The choice was always there. The Council chose wrong, and the galaxy would never forget.